Me and my son have swapped rooms because obviously a 12-year-old needs his own ensuite.
Naturally. Not like us. When we were kids, used to share a bathroom with half the street.
You had a bathroom?
Well, we called it a bathroom. Sorry, I'm a bit wheezy today.
Are you all right?
I'll be fine. It's a bit coffee and spluttery, so I'll turn away from the microphone periodically to splutter.
It's all that toxic MDF.
It is, absolutely. That'll be a subject of the day, will it not?
I think it might be. It might be.
I have much to say about this.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Good.
I've missed our little chats.
Me too. We'll get into that when we start talking about it. But yeah, I've obviously haven't missed you because we're still in touch on social media and all that. But I've missed chatting.
Yes, you're the only person I can talk to about wood, really. So
yeah, well, no, everybody else falls asleep, didn't they?
Yeah. So my son's moved into what was my studio room because one of the benefits of new builds, if people aren't aware, especially in the UK, is that you tend to get like millions of bathrooms now. I mean, newer new builds that are coming out, almost every room has an ensuite. It's just, gardens are disappearing and ensuites are appearing.
Modern times, man.
So in my old studio room, I had an ensuite that was literally just never used.
Yeah.
And it seemed a bit of a waste. And as my son's getting a bit older and to save fighting over bathroom time with his sister.
Oh, I'm familiar with that one, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of made sense that he went into, or someone went into the ensuite room just to make use of that bathroom that was going spare. But it's a smaller room, but he's quite happy with smaller, cosy spaces. So I've scored for this.
He's a lad. He'll turn it into a cave.
He literally wants to paint the walls black or like a shade of grey, because we've painted our living room like a dark grey and it actually looks really nice. And he's seen that and he's like, I want my bedroom to be that colour, but darker.
Yeah.
And I said to him, that'll be pretty much black.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's like, no, that's fine, it's fine. And so he's going to have a smaller, literally a cave, I think, that he's going to be living in. But he will have an ensuite, which is nice. And I've scored for this giant room on the top floor, but I might need to run some sort of physical network cable up here from where the router... Because I've got a Wi-Fi extender thing, but they never seem to work particularly well. I don't know.
Yeah, I've bit the bullet and put a Netgear Orbi thing in, which is a supposedly mesh networky thing, which works okay, but it's a bit disappointing. I've got to say, I was hoping it would stretch across the street to the workshop,
right?
And it doesn't. It doesn't. It's two of these covers a 5,000 square foot home. Like heck, well, maybe in California when it's just one big room, but here, when you're walls full of bits of metal and horse muck and whatever else they put in them. If I had one, you have like a master one and it's not a slave one, but a secondary one. The master one, if I put that in the front of the house so the signal would reach to just outside the workshop, we couldn't get anything in the back of the house upstairs. So it's a bit unsatisfactory considering what they cost. I'm underwhelmed with it, I've got to say.
How much was that?
300 quid.
Right. Because we've just got one of the cheapy, I think it was about 50 quid, little plug-in socket Netgear thing. You literally just plug it in anywhere in the house.
Yeah. Is that the one that then puts an Ext network on?
Yes. Yeah. But whenever you connect to the Ext network, it's just, no matter where you are in the house, even if you're right next to it, it's nowhere near as fast as just connecting up to the normal Wi-Fi. Yeah. And often...
And you've got to remember to connect it, and then when you're downstairs, you realise that your thing's connected to the external one instead of the current one. And
it's like, why is the Wi-Fi really slow? And then you realise, it's because I've connected up to the Ext one accidentally.
Yeah, maddening. Modern times, eh?
I know. So I might just run a giant, long physical cable from downstairs to upstairs and be done with it, because I'm sick of mucking on with...
Well, there's a lot to be said for it. A simple wire that leads up to your new studio room, and then another Wi-Fi little dingus from there maybe might be the answer.
I could even just go physical straight into the back of the computer, to be honest.
Sure, yeah.
But I've got the cable, but I haven't got a crimping tool, so I'd have to buy a crimping tool, which is a bit annoying. I've got like a BT one, but I haven't got an RJ45 one. So
yeah.
One more thing that I don't have in my toolbox.
Only one. I'm impressed.
Welcome back to Season 3 of the Measuring Up podcast, Episode 21. What's your poison? Measuring Up is the UK's first and farthest we know only commercial joinery podcast. I'm Andy MacLellan and I run a joinery and cabinet making business up in sunny Newcastle upon Tyne, and I do Gosforth Handyman on YouTube.
And I'm Peter Millard and I run a carpentry and cabinet making business in the Garden Spot of West London, just a stone's throw away from leafy Chiswick, where the air isn't quite as clear as some would like. Every couple of weeks we get together in our internet cafe to talk about the topics of the day, whatever takes our fancy or whatever's been suggested by you, our fantastic listeners. But before we get into any of that, Andy Mac, welcome back. How have you been?
I've been very well, thank you. Happy New Year again.
Thank you. Yes, Happy New Year to you too. Seems strange saying that in February, doesn't it?
It does. Back into Season 3. You know what it is? I'm just looking out the window here and it's beautiful. I'm not going to jinx it. I'm not going to say that spring has sprung. But the weather over the last week's been gorgeous.
Yeah, no episode of Measuring Up podcast is complete without a weather report, because we are British after all. But I recall it was almost exactly a year ago we sat down, huddled in different rooms as it was then, to start recording this podcast, not knowing if anybody was going to listen, and we still don't really know if anybody's listening. But we were in the throes of the beast from the east, this sort of Siberian blast in sub-zero figures, in double figures, and yet today it is cool out there, but the sun's cracking the flags, and we've got a projected high down here at least of 13 or 14 degrees. So it feels like spring is definitely on the way. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's about 10 degrees up here, and one of the disadvantages, my workshop's quite well insulated, as you know, because I only have a tiny little electric fan heater to heat the thing up. And the only disadvantage of that is that when the weather does turn, suddenly you go from it being freezing cold outside and quite warm in the workshop to it being quite warm outside and freezing cold in the workshop. You know, there's probably a 5 degree difference until I've managed to kind of slowly warm the workshop back up to outside temperature.
Yeah. It is quite nice in summer, though, to have a slightly cooler workspace, I have to say, because my place is built like a brick, bunker. And it's very pleasant to be in, I have to say. A little airless, but we'll come back to that later. Yeah,
definitely in the summer. In the winter, it's a royal pain in the backside. And for me, one of the big problems I've got, I've only got a 16 amp feed into the workshop.
Yeah.
So when I've got the electric heaters running, which are basically 2,000 watts each.
Yeah.
That's consuming nigh on everything. So I have to switch the heaters off before I can use any tools, otherwise it trips the electrics. So,
yeah.
And then if I'm filming at the same time, I have to remember to press pause on the podcast, switch the heaters off, switch the air cleaner off, because you can hear all of that in the background while you're filming. Then use your machines, then switch your heaters back on, switch your air cleaner back on, switch your podcasts back on. And you're doing that literally in between every shot.
Yeah. I've stopped listening to stuff in the workshop, actually. I just don't have anything on now because it was getting so disjointed that, a lot of the podcasts that we listen to, as we've started doing podcasts ourselves, we know that people listen to them on a commute and while they're working or whatever else. But I try and give them a little bit of attention, and I find if I'm listening to them while I'm working, I'm as you say, constantly stopping, pausing them. It gets a little bit disjointed, and I enjoy them. I'd like to listen to them properly rather than half listening, half not.
It's a tricky kind of balance. I do, and it depends on the podcast as well. But sometimes you get really into a certain topic, and then you miss key bits of it. And I've had it where I've had to re-listen the same podcast 3 times just to finally get everything out of it that you wanted to get out of it. But I might give a mention to some of those later on. There's been some very interesting bits of follow-up on various podcasts that I've been listening to. What have you been making?
Making a mess, mostly. I haven't been doing much, actually. I was Where did we speak? We spoke just after Christmas, wasn't it? And I had a lot of January off. January is generally a quieter month anyway. And I think I said when we last spoke, I've been working sort of flat out right up till Christmas, and just needed to kind of take stock. Really, I needed a bit of rest and recovery time for myself. Wanted to go and see my dad for a bit, and I wanted to dedicate. I decided that I needed to dedicate a bit of time to YouTube to do. I've had a series sort of promised for a long time, and I finally got that put together. It's one of those things that I knew it was going to run over many parts, and it wasn't the kind of thing that I could do one here and one there. You needed to have a solid run at it. So I got that done, and it's gone okay. Yeah, happy enough with that.
It's a great series. I haven't watched all of it yet. It's kind of queued up. I've watched the first couple, and I think I'm up to the Blades one. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But I think it is one of those ones that people will dip in and out of. I
think so, yeah. I mean, this is the Tracksaw Workshop series that I first talked about when I first did my Festool Cheap Tool about 18 months ago, and it's taken me that long to find or to make the time to finally get around to making it. And I did need to dedicate. I think I did a special for my Patreon supporters.
Oh, yes, I watched it.
About how long it took to make, and I think I sent you a link to that as well, didn't I, Andy? And it was, without giving the game away, it was a couple of days per episode to shoot and edit. So it was a big chunk of time, and it took a lot of attention. And yeah, I think it's one of those things. It's as with all YouTube, I'm experimenting all the time, and I think you are too, Andy. Because you don't really know what you're doing, as at least I don't anyway. We're always trying different things and different ways of approaching things. And I put all these 7 episodes out in one day in one hit because I wanted to see if that would feed into the YouTube algorithm, because it's supposed to like it when people watch one after another. People binge watch. It's supposed to start ranking it higher, and maybe it did. I haven't noticed any great difference in the viewing figures, but it was something I wanted to try, and yeah, it's done okay. I'm happy enough with it, and I think as you say, it's one of those sort of evergreen things that people will come back to and dip into.
I think so. It's a great series. I've been enjoying it so far, so I'm looking forward to getting through the rest of those. Things have just been manic. I've barely had a chance to watch any YouTube at all recently. I'm so far behind.
Exactly. This is the problem, isn't it? When you do YouTube and podcasting yourself, one of the first victims of your social life is YouTube and podcasting. You don't have time to watch much or listen to much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've been putting those safety videos out.
Yeah, I saw those. They're great.
Which is something I've been wanting to do for quite a long time, and I'm working on the table saw one at the moment. And really, the table saw one is probably one of the most important ones, because it's what causes the most injuries, it's what causes the most horrific injuries, and it's one of those tools that people tend to just kind of buy and they just get it out the box and start mucking on with it. And I really think it's a tool that you have got to do your research and know what you're doing with it before, because the implications of something going wrong on a table saw are colossal.
Yeah.
From best case of losing fingers to complete death, basically. So
yeah, and because of the way the blade spins as well, it will drag your hand in if you get too close, and it happens so quickly as well. We see some YouTube videos about it, and people. There's one. We'll see if we can find it and put a link in the show notes of a guy trying to demonstrate kickback, and he actually shoots it and gets his hand so close to the blade. It's terrifying. It really is.
I think I've seen that. If it's not trying to suck you into the blade, then it's trying to fire wood directly into your face at the speed of a bullet.
Yes.
Yeah, so the table saw safety one, it's a video that I really want to get right, but I don't want it to be boring, because otherwise people will get like 5 minutes into it and just switch off. But there's a lot of stuff that you need to cover, to do a video like that justice, it needs to be best part of 2 hours long or something at least.
Yeah.
So trying to condense all that down to a 15-minute video, it's really difficult.
Yeah, sure.
And but some of the videos that are out there on YouTube at the moment, because I did a quick bit of research as to, well, you know, I don't want to be just reinventing the wheel and putting out exactly the same content that someone else has already put out. And I had a watch of some of the top table saw safety videos on YouTube, and they're terrible. I mean, just the information that's being put out. Videos saying, I mean, the problem is that YouTube will favour the video that's got the most views, and it'll put that to the top of the search results.
Yes.
And there's a video that's 10 years old, and I'm not having a go in any which way, shape or form at the people who made the video. I'm sure at the time it was very good and very relevant, but things have moved on now, and as I say, it's a 10-year-old video. And it's saying in that video that it's okay not to use a push stick if the cut is 3 inches wide or more.
3 inches?
3 inches? I mean, there's no way that I would be running my hand down a 3-inch gap between the fence and the blade without a push stick. And they're putting that across in a table saw training video. I mean, the health and safety executive, their publication says, I think 6 inches, which I think is still far too close.
Yeah.
That my general rule of thumb is always use a push stick unless there's a really, really good reason not to. Because as I've said in the videos, it's about what happens when things go wrong. It's not about what happens when things are going right with the cut.
Yes.
It's about where your hand's going to get pushed when you get a kickback incident and your hand gets pushed into the path of the blade. Anyway, that's a whole thing. So I've been trying to get the table saw video done for the last month or so, and I've finally got the script ready. So I need to start filming that at some point. But I had a backlog of videos to get because I was away on holiday last week, and so I had to get a backlog of videos filmed for over that period. So that was 5 videos I had to get done, like on the back, just to get everything scheduled and while I was away. And also, as you know, for when you get back, you don't want to be straight into making videos the second you walk back through the door. And it was nice to have that little 5 video buffer. And as per usual, it's disappeared.
Yeah. But it's a lot of work to do that. As we've said before, it's a lot of work to get those 5 videos out and organised in advance.
It was more than a week's work. I would have said close to 2 weeks' work to get 5 videos done, edited, scheduled, thumbnails, you know, everything that has to be done on the back end.
Voiceovers done, whatever else needs to be done.
And then it just disappears, you know, like that. Suddenly your backlog's just gone.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
So are you gradually getting back into making stuff again? Or?
Well, yes. I mean, January the 1st rolls around and suddenly everybody looks out the window and thinks, "Oh, spring's on the way." I've never had so many people contacting me in the last week or two looking for quotes or to get work done or to get work that we talked about last year put in hand. So it's all busying up, although some of these are pretty big, actually. I went to see one yesterday. It's two parts to it. One is a sort of dressing room, walk-in wardrobe setup, which is sort of 3 walls worth of hanging space and drawers and, you know, whatever, about 20 drawers in all, just in this space. So that's going to be quite substantial if that works out. And the other one was for the same client, like a big vanity for a bathroom, but they want drawers on either end and cabinet in the centre and a marble top with a below the counter sink. So yeah, potentially quite fun to do, but a lot of work. And this is, you know, as I said last year, I'm trying to take on smaller projects, and I don't think it's quite going to work out.
It's so tricky getting that balance between making stuff and doing the YouTube thing.
It's very difficult. And, again, we're not moaning about this. Don't want to come across as a bunch of whiners because nobody's putting a gun to our heads making us do YouTube videos. But, we've started down this path and they tend to be quite popular. So it's a lot to give up on if we were to stop doing them.
Yeah.
So I think, generally speaking, I'd certainly like to continue. But I think this year I'm in a strange place with YouTube, I've got to say, because the last couple of months in particular, the videos have done really well. Everyone has had solid viewing figures. We get analytics on all this sort of stuff. We get so the retention is really good. They're watching one video after another. They're watching most of the video. And yet my subscriber count has utterly stalled. I haven't had subscriber growth this low. And again, I'm not whining about this. I appreciate all the subscribers who come along and join the party. But I haven't had growth this low since month 4 on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, it's picked up a little bit now. But very, very low, which would be fine, but it's comes at a very odd time because everything else is going really well. The viewing figures are really good. As I say, the retention's really good. Watch time's good. I don't know. It's a funny one. I'm not crawling under the duvet and crying about it at night or anything, but it's an odd one. It's curious. As I said, it has picked up a little bit now.
I mean, January's always an awkward one anyway on YouTube, and I've had many a January where I've turned around and said, right, that's it, I'm packing it in. This is ridiculous, because you just see that utter slump in the revenue that the channel's bringing in because advertisers. Yeah, this
was my first revenue earning January, so the previous one I'd literally only just switched monetization on. So but it was a noticeable downturn after the bumper Christmas edition.
So basically, if people aren't aware, advertisers chuck quite a lot of money at the platform around Christmas time, obviously to get your buying pennies.
Big selling season, Christmas.
Yeah, and then their advertising budgets literally cut off on 1st of January or the end of December. Mm. And you see that immediately on your statistics, and suddenly the revenue that the channel's bringing in, it drops by a colossal amount, almost 50%, probably, I would say, certainly more than 40% drop in revenue in January for me.
Yeah.
And then it gradually picks up again, but it is horrible to watch because it's like you're putting all that effort in and making all the videos and you're seeing the figures go down. And it's tricky. And I've seen the same. I mean, my subscriber growth hasn't been great, and everything that I'm seeing on the channel is the stuff that's bringing the subscribers in isn't new videos. It's old videos that are still performing really well.
Yeah.
But the new videos are still getting, well, unless there's the odd video I've done which I had an inkling that it would do pretty well, like the Joiner versus IKEA one. I thought, that's probably going to be quite a good... Mm-hmm. It's not just aimed at joinery, it's also aimed at people who are thinking of getting a joiner, so it's going to appeal to a wider market.
Yeah.
But for the stuff that's purely joinery orientated, the numbers haven't really increased at all recently, and all of the growth of the channel's coming from much, much older videos that are...
Interesting, isn't it?
Some videos that I put out 2 years ago that are performing really, really well. It's just bizarre.
And as with all these things, you can tie yourself in knots trying to figure out the analytics, and it doesn't pay to do that. I don't think. I think you just got to kind of accept what it is to a large extent. But it is curious, and if you've got a brain in your head, you kind of try and figure this stuff out. And I don't know if there's an actual answer to it. You watch all these things and. There are loads of videos on YouTube about how to improve your ranking on YouTube and all the rest of it, and what to make and how to make videos that people are searching for and all that sort of stuff. And that's all very well, but then you don't end up making the videos that you want to make. So we've got to try and find a sort of happy middle ground somewhere along the way, don't we? And
I think so. And I think both of our channels are, in the scheme of things, doing pretty well. I've still seen channels who are up to their 300th video and they're only getting 50 views per video, and they're pretty good videos, It's not like
and it's a wonder that they carry on.
And they're doing the perseverant thing. They're putting out good content, and they're just getting hardly any views. And I think in certain sectors, the market is just really saturated with videos, and I think that's one of the problems. YouTube has a much bigger pool of videos on a certain topic to pick from, and plus it's trying to use its own AI to decide what videos to show to people, which I think for certain things that works pretty well. I think for our stuff, I think it works incredibly badly because the AI doesn't know what the difference between a festool, track saw, and the suggestions aren't entirely appropriate, are they? When it's trying to decide on what content to suggest to people, and I see it in my own feed, some of the stuff that I get suggested to me is just, it's nonsense, it's just it's of no interest for me to watch. But sadly, that's the way YouTube's going. It's going much more away from the subscription model. Yes, true. And it's going really for the model of it suggesting what to show you. I was listening to quite an interesting podcast recently about Google advertising and Google AdWords and things like that, because it used to be a case that if you wanted to pay for Google AdWords and have your website featured at the top of the search results or within the Google AdSense program, you used to be able to pick where your advert would appear. All right. But Google are now much more going down the route of making everything AI driven, where it won't even give you the option to decide where you want your advert to be put. It will just work it out as to where to show your advert, where it thinks it's going to, what's best for you, because generally the AI is probably going to perform better, but when it's in its infancy and you can see it not performing better, it is very frustrating. But we'll hang on in there. Yes. We'll hang on in there. We will. And in the meantime, but yeah, it makes it difficult to make decisions about. I've got a big job at the moment that I'm quoting on, and I genuinely don't know whether to say I can do it or not, because I've got other work in the pipeline that's already booked in. And between that work, which is going to occupy me for the majority of the year anyway, and between that and YouTube, I kind of don't want to spread myself too thin, because I've already not got enough time to do everything I'm trying to do. Yeah. Well, we've said before, YouTube has become more than a full-time job. There was a thing. Do you follow Sean Cannell? No, Sean Cannell at Think Media TV. Right. He's very good. He's gone a bit sort of lifestyle advice and coaching, that kind of stuff. But he's very, very sharp, very switched on sort of guy. Very good. Couple of very solid YouTube channels about promoting your YouTube brand and all that sort of stuff. And he put a thing out on Twitter. I haven't got it to hand. About is this the year that you go full time on YouTube? And I just put back, it's already like a full time job. It just pays like a minimum wage 0 hours gig, and the number of likes and retweets I got on that one tweet was unreal. So yes, it's already more than a full time job's worth in terms of hours. I'm thinking that this is my third year. It'll be my third year on YouTube, and I think it's the crunch year in a way. Really, it's either got to stop or got to go full time on it. I can't. It's just too much to try and have it as a part time gig. So it either starts to need paying a bit more for itself, or I need to retire. That's the other option. It's tricky. I'm very much at a similar kind of point where the next job that comes in may be the last commercial job that I take on. Yeah. And that's, very, very tentatively speaking. But But other than smaller, little one-off things where I'm helping out regular customers who I've done work for them for years,
Yes.
I'll still try and do that sort of thing. But in terms of big jobs, it just makes it, it's tricky. Anyway, we're banged on about YouTube forever and
First world problems, hey.
yeah, but there's remind me on the follow-up. There is quite an interesting one that I shall tell you about on the follow-up later on, or what I've been listening to later on. In terms of follow-up, we've had loads of follow-up.
We've had some great follow-up coming in on the email contact@measuringuppodcast.com. Great stuff. Do you want to you start? You put the messages in.
Okay, we got a really interesting one. I know we've said that we'll stop talking about the apprenticeship thing, but it is really interesting. So we got a really interesting one from, he just calls himself DA, and the subject is apprenticeship rant. And he's just said, I love the podcast, listen to the YouTube channel, same business as both of us, running his from a single garage, and really enjoys hearing from UK-based joiners and what they do and how they do it. And he was saying, I'll read you exactly what he says. I served my apprenticeship with Carillion. Yes, the one that went belly up. I did about 2.5 years, spread between theory in college and practical on-site with 2 different outfits. I was basically free labour, but did pick up stuff. But I'd say a lot of my learning was done by myself, reading and YouTube, and getting out there and doing the job, and pure determination. The only real benefit from getting the apprenticeship was that he had a piece of paper saying that he was qualified to NVQ level 2 and got a CSCS card. He goes on to say, this helped me get jobs with firms as that's what they wanted to see. I went on to level 3 NVQ, but I've never been asked for this by clients. I did a level 3 in college and I left because it was not professional at all. And if you want details on this, I can explain further. I hear a lot from older blokes that apprenticeships these days aren't worth much, and I can agree with this. So, yeah, not great.
No.
I would love to hear more positive stuff about apprenticeship. I think a lot of it is massively driven by the organisation that you have chosen, like the college that you're working through, because there are some colleges that I've seen, they have amazing setups, for the trades, electricians, joiners, plumbers, and they've got all these amazing labs set up, mechanics. And there was one particular one, I'll link to it in the show notes if I can remember what it was called, and it just looked amazing. If you were going to do an apprenticeship and your college study in the trades, that looked like the place to go. But on the flip side, I also hear a lot of colleges, about a lot of colleges where the training in the college itself is pretty much non-existent.
Yeah.
And then you're largely relying on what you're getting taught on site at your apprenticeship, and then that's down to the luck of the draw of whether you've managed to get a decent apprenticeship or not. And as DA said, whether you're just being used as a lackey.
Cheap labour, yeah.
And, frustrating.
Yeah, it's a thoroughly unsatisfactory situation.
Yeah, the whole
really?
thing needs full review from the ground up. And I thought it was very interesting, the stuff that was being put out recently about GCSEs potentially getting abolished and a full rethink of how all of that works. I personally think that's a great idea. I think it needs a lot more than just that. I think everything needs to be rethought from the ground up.
Yeah.
We have this wealth of information out there that people can teach themselves, and they can go onto YouTube, and, schools and colleges should be there to help you with the homework side of things, and the things that you don't understand.
Yeah, very true.
There are better resources out there to learn than sitting in a college, twiddling your thumbs, maybe not being taught by people who are as passionate about a subject as some people.
You're being diplomatic there, Andy. That's not about you.
I'm trying to be diplomatic. I'm really trying to be diplomatic. Anyway, go on. You do a follow-up.
Well, the next one was kind of for you as well, actually. You've become a tech reviewer.
Oh, yes.
I believe you reviewed your OnePlus 6T. And the message came from calls himself Voyager 03. Good to hear that you like the OnePlus 6T, Andy. I think he was the first person to recommend this to you a few weeks back. But the reason for the post was Instagramming pictures taken from a proper camera, proper in quotes there. He says it's easier than you might imagine because you can edit them on your computer and upload to Dropbox or similar, and then connect your phone to your Dropbox account and post to Instagram from there. He says he just tried it the other day. Because him and his wife have gone over to editing on Luminar.
Okay.
Don't know what that is. And he tweaked an old image from a holiday and imported it directly to Dropbox and put it in his Instagram straight from his phone. So, yeah, good stuff, good stuff.
The problem is, for me, is that still is adding 2 extra steps in that shouldn't need to exist. Because you're still going to have to transfer the files to Dropbox, and then you're still going to have to go onto your phone to do the upload from your phone. Whereas, why can't I just do it from the computer that the files are already sitting on? It's just like, I totally get that you can do it.
It is infuriating that there is a way of posting to Instagram from your computer, but you've got to fool it into thinking you're on a mobile device or something through the browser. Even tablets, they just steadfastly refuse to support iPads or other tablets. They don't have an app that works on it.
Really?
Yeah. You'd think that would be the perfect device.
I didn't realise that.
Bigger and everything else, yeah.
That's insane.
They just refuse flat to do it. Madness.
That's absolutely insane.
I would have been all over Instagram so much sooner if they'd have had an iPad app. You can run the... I don't think you can anymore, but you could run the iPhone app on an iPad, but it was a clunky old 4 times the size thing back when they did that sort of thing. Not even sure you can do that now, which is a shame because I'm really getting into Instagram. I've really been enjoying it this last sort of 6 months or so that I've been a bit more active on it. And actually, I've moaning about my YouTube subscribers not growing as quickly as I'd hoped. My Instagram's been doing really well. I'm getting lots of followers on there. So maybe we as a podcast need to do more for Instagram.
We're proud in all that spare time we've got.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's frustrating when technology doesn't do what you expect it to be capable of doing. And but thanks to Voyager 03 and the OnePlus 6T is awesome. As I say, it just ticks all the boxes for me. I think I've been struggling away with my old Samsung for so long, and it was getting, literally unusably slow. You would click on the camera icon and wait 20 seconds before the camera would even get into camera mode, and talk about missed moments and all that.
I think one of the problems with all these sort of tech reviews as well on YouTube and in other places too, on the web, is that the guys who do the reviews are coming from last year's phone to this year's phone, and actually, it's just an incremental update. Well, yeah, of course it is, because that's all they can do these days. If you're coming from a 2 or 3 year old phone, which is what most people do, or a 4 or 5 year old phone, the differences are spectacular. You were gushing almost for you about your phone in your review, and the difference is spectacular. The screen isn't scratched for a start.
Yes, yeah, and the power button works.
Awesome,
amazing. I can do screenshots.
Fantastic.
I couldn't do screenshots before because you have to hold down the power button and the up volume button to do a screenshot. So I had to install an app just to do screenshots, and then that app would never work properly anyway. Yeah.
Anyway, long old story, and you're desperately sad to be rid of your old Samsung, aren't you?
I'll stop banging on about it now, but I've still got it sitting in a box. We're being told not to dispose of old mobile phones now because of all the confidential data that's potentially sitting on them, unless you know how to do some sort of low-level format on them. And
was your phone capable of storing any confidential information?
Oh, it was very, very good at storing stuff. It's just you couldn't get the information back.
Chock full of banking records.
Well, it's all the password, cached passwords and things like that over the years, and that's all stored somewhere on your phone. And yes, you can do factory resets and things like that, but there was quite an interesting thing the other day that I saw where they were saying, a factory reset, it's kind of a quick format of the phone. The data's still there.
Yeah.
It's just the partition tables or whatever have been wiped and recreated or whatever. But the if someone really wanted to, there is a risk involved in just selling a second-hand phone that's just been factory resetted, if that makes sense. Yeah. But either way, I need to keep the old one just for text messages and stuff, and I've never really found a good way of archiving text messages off a phone. I've done like a...
Do you not just keep them?
Not when you get a new phone, unless you've got your text stored on your SIM card. Then as soon as you get a new phone, your messages are gone. Unless you've used some sort of app to transfer them across. I think you can do that, but I've never tried. With Apple, it could well be different, where your texts are all getting stored in the cloud somewhere.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I'm conflating text messages with. I just think of all messaging as text messaging now. It's iMessage or WhatsApp or whatever are not held actually on your phone. There, it's a cloudy thing, and they just follow you. Basically.
Interestingly, I couldn't move WhatsApp stuff across at all because it's tied to your SIM card.
Really?
And the only way that I could would be to put the SIM card back into my old phone, but that would then anyway it would cause all sorts of weird synchronization issues. Oh, I need to stop banging on about this. It's the most boring thing in the world. Anyway, the next bit of feedback, Fusion 360 and SketchUp from Karam. Who he was saying that he found it quite interesting in the chat that we're having about Fusion 360 and SketchUp. It says that they use SketchUp personally for the design of a few ideas because it's for personal use and it's free. We had quite a few people saying that Fusion 360 is free if your turnover is less than like 100,000 or something like that. I can't remember.
I think we'll just sneak under that limit this year, won't we?
Yeah, I think we'll just about get by with that. I did have someone on the comments on YouTube saying that if you're a joiner, then you obviously will be charging VAT.
Oh yeah.
I was trying to explain that I don't earn more than £85,000 a year, and he just couldn't grasp this. And it's like, well, he's either doing very, very well, or he's just not a joiner, or doesn't understand VAT. Yeah. Or he's working on very old threshold limits, which is another possibility. Anyway, Fusion 360 is something that I'll be using hopefully in the next few months as part of my engineering course in conjunction with AutoCAD. In my view, the reason Fusion 360 is much more capable is because it's been industry standard in the engineering sector for decades now. I didn't realise that. According to my CAD instructor from college, at least, SketchUp is playing catch-up. And from what I understand, the purpose of SketchUp was to bring 3D design to a wider audience, because originally the pricing for Fusion 360 was just unaffordable for the small business. So that's
I see. That's
really
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so now it's gone kind of 360, pardon the pun, and SketchUp have made themselves prohibitively expensive for anything unless you're a big corporation or you're using it just for personal use and it's free, or you've got the option of Fusion, which is free if you earn under 100,000, apparently. So
I had no idea that Fusion 360 was an older application. I'd assumed it was new.
I'd noticed that it was backed by AutoCAD and seemed to have references to AutoCAD, which has obviously been around for a long time. So I guess, maybe that's where it all came from. Anyway,
fascinating. I've never got to grips with any of them. I've got to say, I've fiddled with SketchUp. And it's great, but it leaves me cold. I'd rather do a nice, simple 2D drawing. And clearly my business has been held back because of that.
Yes.
I could have been, above the VAT threshold had I been using SketchUp. I'm
very true.
Producing beautifully proportioned 3D drawings full of naturally rendered surfaces and 3D lighting. But
it's definitely on my list to get into 360 and try and get my head around it. I'm only the thing is, I'm only just getting to the point now with SketchUp where I can knock something up in SketchUp quicker than I could do it on paper. And it's taken a long time to get to that point. But now I'm relatively confident with it, as long as the thing I'm making is pretty straightforward. But generally, in joinery, most things are just rectangles.
Yeah. When
I've had a brief look at 360, it's like starting again. I need to just learn everything from the ground up. And
because all of this sort of learning, I tend to feel, is taking us away from what I should be doing. Whether it's doing stuff for YouTube or actually grinding out a living, banging out alcove cabinets or whatever else. All this stuff, a week of evening spent trying to get your head around Fusion or SketchUp, come to that, is just dead time to me. It's not productive. I don't see it as an investment in my future, and maybe that's a bad thing. But I just, enough.
Well, thankfully, there are some very, very good videos out there on YouTube about SketchUp and 360. My personal favourite are Jay Bates's videos. His videos are fantastic. We'll pop a link in the show notes. He's done some great videos on SketchUp, and I think he started doing some really good ones on Fusion as well. So if you want to get into it, there's a good resource for you. Jay Bates on YouTube.
But you'd have to forget all that if you go to Fusion, right?
Well, no, he has done some Fusion videos, so yeah, he has done some. But obviously, this all assumes that you're going to be making your furniture out of wood, and potentially wood that might have been turned into something like chipboard or MDF or plywood or anything else that's been glued together in some sort of form.
Yeah. And
that's going to kill you.
Everything's going to kill you. Actually, life is a really bad test subject because at the end of it, everybody dies, right?
You've got a good point.
Yeah, I mean, there was a story that broke whilst you were, you might have just been back from your holes, about toxic MDF. And I put a little video out about this because it was too good to miss, really, on Tuesday, and it's been doing quite well. There was a story in the Guardian newspaper over the weekend that it was from a couple just down the road from me in Chiswick, who and the headline is, "Our MDF furniture brought toxic fumes into our home." Nice non-inflammatory headline there, and it's a. We'll put a link to the story, to the Guardian article in the show notes so that everybody can go and read it and hopefully make their own minds up about this. But goodness me, it's one of those sort of stories that's going to be held over the heads of independent makers and installers for years to come, isn't it? If you've got the time, go and read it. And if your blood pressure and stomach can stand it, have a read of the comments alongside the Guardian article as well, because my goodness, they make our YouTube comments seem like calm and rational.
Oh man, I mean, these sort of articles boil my. The thing is, it came through. I think it was literally on the day that I got back from my jolly, so I'm like catching up on messages, and then this came through, and a couple of people had like. Copied me in on tweets and various other things.
And thank you everybody for who put us onto this article. I started getting messages about it very early on Saturday morning. Have you seen this? Yeah. So. And
then I read it, and when I read it, the first thing that went through my mind is, someone's dredged up an article from 10 years ago because a long time ago people used to be constantly paranoid about whether or not MDF and other composite products are going to kill you. And because the word formaldehyde was mentioned, and that's another whole thing that we've briefly talked about on the podcast before. And the first thing I thought was, someone's dredged up an old article. And then I looked at the date of the article, and it was like that week or whatever. And it's like, for goodness sake, has this reared its head again? Has this not been finally put to bed by all of the wealth of scientific tests that have been done on this, and the fact that it passes every safety, regime on the planet, different, the British standards and then the international standards and the Canadian standards and all that side of things.
Just to rub salt into the wound, one of the injured parties is a former BBC science correspondent. So, if anybody should know better, it would be them. What do you want to do? Should we just recap the story quickly?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay. So, a couple down the road from me in Chiswick had some fitted furniture put in their home. They paid a lot of money for this furniture. And let's we're not being judgy here at all. It's a horrible, torrid tale. We wouldn't wish this on anybody, and I personally feel deeply for everybody involved in it. But the story goes, and all we know is what's been reported. All we know that is what's been published. I've contacted everybody involved in the story. There's the couple concerned. There's the company that made and fitted the furniture. There's the journalist who wrote the article, and there's a company that did some air quality monitoring. I've contacted everybody, and the only response I've had is an out of office email from the journalist. So yeah, excellent, good stuff for that. Thank you. So this all goes back a long way as well. This in April 2017, so not last year, the year before. This couple paid a lot of money, reported £18,500 for this fitted furniture. They paid $16,000 upfront. And during the course of a 4-day installation, they started getting fumes, basically, that were affecting them very badly. They couldn't stay in the room for more than 30 seconds. And the upshot of it is they insisted on having the furniture ripped out. They had the air quality in the room tested by a third party, by a former government lab. And there are some really choice quotes in here. I say quotes in quotes because it's not clear who is actually being quoted. In the first paragraph, toxic fumes were 13 times the World Health Organization's limits. And then later on they say formaldehyde levels were 18 times the building regulations. That's a really clumsily constructed sentence. We'll come back to that as well. But anyway, the upshot of all this is that the couple have been refunded. The supplying company has apparently paid for the cost of the air quality monitoring tests, which were an equally expensive, I think £2,800 or £2,880 just to have the air quality monitored. You can make up your own eye-watering jokes to that one, I think. That's kind of the story, really. But the one half of the couple, the former BBC science reporter, it has taken issue with the fact that the formaldehyde levels were very high. So, as they say, 18 times the building regulations, whatever that means. She's tried to get the trading standards involved, and they have effectively declined. The supplying firm had the health and safety executive visit their premises just to ensure that their workers weren't being put at risk and they were given a clean bill of health. And that's kind of the story. It's about 1,100-word article, of which less than 70 are dedicated to the supplying firm. So literally 2 small paragraphs right at the end. Supplying company told Guardian Money that MDF and all paints and other materials used came from well-known and well-respected suppliers that conform to all UK and European safety standards. It says this is the first such complaint it's had in the 20 years. They offered to repaint the furniture using an alternative water-based paints and to remanufacture the furniture from fresh, and both suggestions were refused. This article raises so many questions. I've got a list of them as long as your arm, and it wouldn't make particularly interesting a particularly interesting podcast or video come to that if we went through them all. But there's a couple in particular where the story just takes a rapid sort of 90-degree turn. There's so much to say about it and so little proper, genuine, hard information to go on, because all we know is what's been reported in the story, and nobody's saying anything about it. The piece for me where it took a dramatic turn is, I'm just going to find the... Okay, here we go. So directly quoting the article, the couple of nobody would accuse the couple of using a backstreet install. The couple had chosen an award-winning Northamptonshire-based firm to rebuild the bedroom in their terraced home. The cost was £18,500, more than £16,000 paid up front. We're quoting now. I work from home and would pop into the room during the 4-day installation, says one half of the couple. I found my eyes were stinging after about 30 seconds. Their supervisor told me this was quite normal and would go away if we left the windows open overnight. I felt for the workers who were in our bedroom all day fitting the furniture. An electrician who visited to fit wall lights after a day in our bedroom exhibited hay fever-like symptoms, end quotes. It's not clear whether the electrician was part of the supplying company's installers or whether he was a third party as a separate contractor to do the wall lights. I'd like to know if his hay fever-like symptoms went away once he'd left, or did he actually have hay fever? Everybody I've spoken to, and I'm sure you have too, Andy, in our little sort of Twitter and Instagram universe, who's involved in the business as making and installing, has said that hay fever-like symptoms, stinging eyes, watering eyes, runny nose, all that stuff, that's paint fumes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's paint fumes. There's no that we know what that's like. Exactly. We work with MDF all day long. We don't get those symptoms. I was in my timber yard yesterday pulling a sheet of MDF off the rack, and nobody was walking around with PPE on.
Yeah.
Out in the yard.
And this is... it also made a reference to some solvent bottle or something, didn't it? Yeah,
that comes in... Yeah, absolutely. Let me sort of continue with the... So, end quotes. And then we're back to... I think this is from the journalist. When the eye stinging remained 5 days later... I'm not going to name anybody in this. You make your own... I know it's been published already, but we'll tread cautiously. BBC reported... decided to do her own research and soon found the likely cause was formaldehyde fumes, which, according to WHO, World Health Organization, can potentially cause nasopharyngeal cancer. Now we're quoting again. I'd spotted a bottle of solvent that workers had left in the room. Doesn't say which workers. We were left to assume that it's the installers. Back quoting, I called the manufacturer and an expert said eye stinging symptoms were probably due to formaldehyde, which would dissipate after about 3 weeks, she says. But, he asked, I presume she's quoting the expert now, was I aware that MDF itself gave off formaldehyde? This freaked me out as there was so much of it in our bedroom, at which point they contacted former government lab to arrange for air quality tests. So, we've gone from having fumes in a bedroom coming from the fitted furniture to a randomly found bottle of solvent that workers had left. We don't know that it was the workers who were installing the furniture because there's other building work going on in the house at the same time. I can't imagine, and I've done my fair share of installations, I know you have as well, Andy, I can't imagine what sort of solvents any installer would have with them unless they were doing paintwork touch-up with a solvent-based paint.
Yeah, so the solvent has got to be something to do with the paint. You don't...
I mean, maybe, I guess, it could be adhesive-related, but I would say paint-related all day long. So what I think... And again, we can only make guesses here. We can only make suppositions because we don't know the facts. But what I have to presume has happened then, one half of the couple has found this bottle of solvent, called the manufacturer, so every chemical these days typically has a technical or a helpline number on it. So she's found a solvent that's related to the paint product, called then the paint-related technical helpline, who has confirmed, yes, it's probably formaldehyde gassing off, which will dissipate, has figured out that the finger of blame is pointing at them and their product and the paint product and is sort of deflecting that towards MDF. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I read it. That was exactly my take on it. And as far as I can tell, there is not a single problem with the MDF. The installers had said that it was sourced from reputable sources where it meets the various British standards and European standards.
Yes.
Which the article goes on to say, it says something along, I haven't got it in front of us, but it says something along the lines of, you should always make sure that you use an MDF that meets CARB 2 standards, doesn't it?
One half of the client says that she would strongly urge others to considering similar work to insist the contractor uses zero formaldehyde MDF if they can obtain it, yeah, big if, or at least CARB 2 compliant MDF that has a certifiably low formaldehyde rating. CARB 2 is Californian Air Resources Board Phase 2, which puts formaldehyde off-gassing particles at 0.05 parts per million. That's exceptionally low. The World Health Organization, WHO, says that an acceptable standard is 0.08 parts per million. And the general consensus is that the natural occurrence of formaldehyde in the atmosphere is 0.03 parts per million. So, the 0.05 is very, very, very close to what occurs naturally. That's a target value. To be fair to CARB, they say that 0.1 is an actionable value, which is in excess of the WHO level, to be fair. But I've done my own little bit of research on this. Again, I'm sure you have it as well, Andy. Buying from reputable manufacturers who produce data sheets, they will specify on their data sheets what standards they comply to. And the product that I use, I'll name it, it's Medite, MRMDF, not only complies to CARB Phase 2, but also exceeds those standards. So it is effectively ultra-low formaldehyde MDF.
And so far, and I had a quick check and I predominantly use Medite as well, although that's another story because it's a little bit tricky to get hold of.
Yeah.
But sometimes my timber merchant has Trupan MDF. I checked the Trupan website and theirs meets CARB 2 compliance. I know I've seen Chronospan MDF in the likes of Wix, and I've checked their website. It doesn't mention CARB 2, but it mentions a whole load of other British standards and European standards, which presumably are the equivalent of or possibly even exceed CARB 2. I'm not sure. We will try and continue digging on that side. I'm not sure what the likes of your big box shifters like B&Q and stuff like that are using, but I would hazard a guess that every major supplier of MDF in the UK are probably selling CARB 2 compliant MDF. That is a guess, but that's just based on the fact that I haven't managed to find anyone who specifically doesn't so far. And if anyone knows, as you have come across, more so, have you ever found MDF in the UK that isn't CARB 2 compliant, or it doesn't meet especially the European and the British standards?
Yes.
Because that is illegal, wouldn't it be? Presumably. So if and I've asked this question on Twitter, did the supplier fit MDF that wasn't CARB 2 compliant? And I've yet to hear anything back on that front. We shall keep you posted.
There's total silence from all parties on this, which I have a theory about that. It's worth mentioning as well. I did a little video on this last week and a few weeks ago, as we are in podcast land. And there's an excellent health and safety executive article about MDF, and in particular about the levels of formaldehyde within it. It's freely available on their website. We'll put a link in the show notes to it. And there is a money quote, which, if you give me 2 shakes. Okay, here we go. In Europe, the majority of manufacturers produce only low-emission boards. There are some boards available on the market with extremely low formaldehyde emissions and some with no added formaldehyde, for example, those using formaldehyde-free binders like PMDI. They're more commonly used in moisture-resistant boards. In other words, these boards will only have the naturally occurring emissions from the wood itself, because all wood releases formaldehyde. And they go on to say manufacturers from outside Europe may produce boards that have higher emissions. So basically, provided you buy boards manufactured within the EU that comply to either the E1 or E2 standards, and preferably exceed the CARB Phase 2 standards, those boards will be releasing minuscule quantities of formaldehyde.
So the crux of it is that the article can be summarised down to the paint was releasing formaldehyde fumes. It was nothing to do with the MDF. It wouldn't make any difference if they were painting chickens in the room. It would still have been releasing formaldehyde fumes from the paint. MDF had nothing to do with it. In other words, the title of the article is absolute nonsense.
Well, the title of the article, this is it sounds like we're being cynical and suspicious. Well, I'm sorry. What do you think made us cynical and suspicious? It's headlines like, "Our MDF furniture brought toxic fumes into our home." That is a very carefully structured headline, because it implies to a casual reader that MDF is the problem.
Yeah.
But it could be read that the MDF furniture brought the toxic fumes into our home with the paint it was painted with.
Yeah.
So, and still makes sense. So that's a very, very carefully constructed sentence. And there are many others in the article. We'd encourage everybody to go and read the article and make up their own mind.
We'll keep badgering. I've been tweeting them every day so far, trying to get copies of this report.
Yeah, you're on a hiding to nothing with that one. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I know. Even if it's a sanitised version, but I would just love to see some scientific evidence backing up the claims that this article is making. And I understand they've paid a lot of money for this report. I'm not asking for a copy of the full report. Just give us the bits that are specific to MDF, to the measurements that they made that are specific to the MDF. Nothing to do with the paint, but this is what the article is getting at. And I would also like to know how the Guardian got to know about this problem as well. Yeah,
it's worth. Well, let me run through a few questions that I'd like answers to. And if this isn't too boring, you can cut it out if it does. For the client, let's call them the client, the company, or the contractor, the journalist, and the air quality monitoring firm. For the client, I'd like to know how much furniture there was, because we see a couple of pictures, but we don't really see the full quantity, because it relates to the volume of fumes that might create. Yeah, I'd like to know about the solvent bottle. What make was it? Who was the manufacturer? What was it for? Did it belong to the installers, or did it belong to somebody else? It's quoted in the article as being 13 times the World Health Organization formaldehyde limits, but no numbers are stated. No numbers are quoted. Why not? Can we see what numbers they are? Other building works at the time, what were they? Could they have affected the results? Again, I think I mentioned this before. The electrician's hay fever-like symptoms, the classic paint fume symptoms, did they go away after he left, or did he just have hay fever? They say that the VOC levels, volatile organic compounds, were 18 times the building regulations. What building regulations? I've looked into this when I was doing my video about it, and I can't find any building regs in England and Wales that refer to VOCs. There's a little bit about ventilation in new builds and that sort of thing, but I can't find an actual VOC level stated. And again, who says there were 18 times? Why no numbers? And of course, we'd like to see a copy of the report. That would be most interesting. That's for the client. For the contractor, what MDF was used? Was it regular? Was it moisture resistant? Was it veneered? Who supplied it? What's the spec sheet on it? I want to know what paint was used. They've offered to repaint it in water-based paint, like this is something special. So we would presume then that it was a solvent-based. So was it acid cat? Was it pre-cat? Was it PU? Acid cat in particular is known for gassing off formaldehyde during the curing process. Did they spray this in-house, or was it sent out? How long between spraying and installing? Was there a last-minute colour change, perhaps? This is not uncommon. Oh, no, we've decided against honeysuckle buttermilk 4. We'd like Calypso Sunset 3. oh, so were they painting this the night before kind of thing because of a client change? And after the strip out, the $64,000 question for the contractors, after they were forced to strip this out, if this was you, Andy, I'd have had that sent for independent testing somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Wouldn't you? Yeah, I wouldn't that anywhere back near me until a piece of that was taken straight to some independent lab to get tested. If I had 16 grand on the line, or 1,600, or 600, 160 to be honest. If me and my reputation was on the line, I'd have that independently tested straight away.
Because otherwise, it calls into question every single job they've ever done. You'd have to get it independently tested to protect yourself.
Absolutely. And this is, you can see, read the article. The company has a very slick website. One of the founders came from a marketing background, so he would have his head screwed on in terms of media storm that's coming their way. So, if they had it tested independently, why don't we see the results? If the results confirmed what the other lab found, then why aren't they saying that? Hands up, fair cop. And if they don't, then why aren't they crowing about it? Questions for the journalist. What was the Guardian's interest in the story? It was in Guardian Money. This was in the Weekend Guardian, which is effectively a weekly newspaper, a weekly version of the daily newspaper. So it's a bit more magazine-y, and it's in the consumer money section, which is typically where aggrieved consumers ask the newspaper to shine the light of truth and honesty into the dark recesses of murky commerce, to hope to find a resolution, some kind of agreement with a company that's done wrong to a consumer. I would like to know if that's the case here. What's the Guardian's involvement in the story? Did they represent the clients to the contractor in order to resolve the deadlock? I'd like to know from the journalist if he actually had sight of the report, or if the quotes, and I'm putting quotes in quotes, air quotes, from the report were what the client told him, or were they what the test company told him? And again, where the quotes are things like the TVOCs are 18 times the building regulations, well, what building regulations in particular? Or are you taking that as gospel from the report or from the client? And for the test company, I'd like to know what their testing procedures were. They look like a pretty slick outfit, and I would hope for, close to $3,000 in testing fees, they would have something slightly more sophisticated than my 80 quid air quality monitor. But I would be curious to see and to hear what those testing procedures were, and how they managed to isolate the air quality in that room from other building works that were apparently going on at the same time. So many, many, many questions.
The company who carried out the testing, if it's a reputable company, they must have an independent viewpoint on this. They must understand that, hold on, yeah, we did the testing, but it was nothing to do with the MDF. It was the paint that was causing the fumes. That was obvious by the tests that we did. Surely, I'm not an expert on paint fumes and MDF gassing of formaldehyde or whatever, but I can understand enough from the article that if you are an expert in that field, even to a layman, you can work out that it's not the MDF to blame. And surely the testing company should have put that across.
Well, you would have hoped so, wouldn't you? You would have hoped so.
Or at least made a statement about it, saying, yes, we did notice the levels were very high, but we do think this was caused by the paint and not the MDF. Just something that I don't know. To me, it
yeah. Well, the money quote from that regard from the article, but as well as very high level, from our high levels, the report found VOCs more than 18 times the building regulations. Now we're quoting, there was, quote, evidence that these are emanating from the fitted furniture, it said. It doesn't say, and I would imagine they can't say, whether it's emanating from the paint or the MDF.
And the ridiculous thing as well, and the comments, geez, The comments are unbelievable.
Oh, well, the comments are choice. Yeah, strong stomach and low blood pressure required before.
One of the things that came up in the comments quite a bit was, oh, wow, for that amount of money, you could have had solid wood wardrobes and all this. And the thing is...
in your dreams.
I don't know a single fitter of solid wood furniture, like built-ins and stuff, who doesn't use MDF, veneered MDF for the carcasses, because it's just a better product. It's a more... Yeah, you might use solid wood for the doors and things like that, but everyone I know who fits solid wood built-ins uses veneered MDF for the carcasses anyway.
Yeah.
So
for all the right reasons, because it's a flat, stable board that won't warp and twist or cup.
Yeah, because it is a better product for what we do. And until we're told otherwise by someone who actually knows what they're talking about, then we will continue to use this. But these sort of articles absolutely infuriate me, because we're the ones at the coalface who now are going to have to put up with the backlash of clients consistently saying, oh, do you use MDF? We don't want it made out of MDF. What else can you make it out of? And it's like, well, we can make it out of real wood, but real wood's still going to have formaldehyde emissions, and it's still going to...
As I showed in my little video in the week, this article prompted me to buy an air quality monitor which measures formaldehyde and TVOC levels, and the levels, were very high. I'd been spraying on the Friday. I came in on the Monday with this, and the levels were very high because the workshop had been cooped up over the weekend. Opened the doors and windows, and all the levels dropped. So just for fun, I took a few bits of... I did a video about bendy baseboards, so a few bits of redwood with kerf cuts in them, and I surrounded the air quality monitor with those bits of redwood, and I got levels that exceeded the WHO and Carb 2 comfortably within 20 minutes.
Just from natural wood?
Just from that natural wood, real tree meat. Which just... And I wasn't doing that as any kind of scientific test. It was just to prove a point. What are we shooting for here?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve? I haven't shared this with you because I wanted you to come into this one cold, but let's play a game. We'll play a game called What's Your Poison? You ready?
Go for it.
Andy Mac, come on down to What's Your Poison? Woo! Yeah. World Health Organization guideline for indoor air formaldehyde concentrations is 0.08 parts per million. The Californian Air Resources Board, CARB, recommends an action level at 0.1, so just above that, and a target level of 0.05. Formaldehyde naturally occurs at 0.03 parts per million. So 0.03 is natural, 0.05 target level, 0.08 WHO. Yeah?
Yeah.
I know you like your cat and cucumber videos, don't you?
Oh, yes.
I can't help you with the cat, but what would you hazard a guess is the level of naturally occurring formaldehyde in cucumber?
Ooh.
Bearing in mind 0.03, 0.05 and 0.08 are naturally occurring limits, target values, and acceptable concentrations.
It's a vegetable that's going to live in my fridge, and then I'm going to feed it to my children. So I would seriously hope, so that I don't kill my children, that it is below 0.03 parts per million.
This is a report that I've dug up from the Agriculture and Food Security, part of BMC Biomedical Central, which basically is a portfolio of 300 peer-reviewed journals. This comes from a June 2018 report in the concentration and formation of naturally occurring formaldehyde in foods. There's also one from the Centre of Food Safety from the government of Hong Kong, which correlates a lot of the findings pretty accurately. Concentration of naturally occurring formaldehyde in cucumber is 6.4 parts per million.
6.4?
That's not 0.64, that's not 0.064, that's 6.4. 80 times the World Health Organization's acceptable limit for air quality.
My kids love cucumbers. They eat them all the time. 2 seconds. Kids, Are you dead yet? No. Kids are fine.
Okay, what's your poison? Cauliflower or cabbage?
Well, both are pretty vile. Let's go for cabbage.
Cabbage, good choice. Excellent choice, sir. Cauliflower has a whopping 30.8 parts per million. Cabbage, a positively demure 8.1, so it's only 101 times the WHO values.
How much for cauliflower?
30.8.
30.8?
Yep, 385 times the WHO limits. Orange or lemon?
Let's go for lemon. That's...
Lemon, very, very good choice. Lemon has actually below a detectable limit of naturally occurring formaldehyde.
Okay.
An orange, on the other hand, has 56.9. This is all science, by the way. There's plus and minus standard deviations and all that sort of stuff in the report. 56.9 parts per million, 711 times the World Health Organization's guidelines. And just to ruin your day, nice cup of coffee, instant or...
it's got to be...
Instant or brewed?
Got to be brewed. Filter coffee.
Got to be brewed. Again, an excellent choice. There's not actually a great deal in it. Brewed coffee, 8.1 parts per million. Instant coffee, 9.6. So brewed coffee, just over 100 times the WHO guidelines, and instant coffee, 120 times. The real eye-opener, there's a whole list of fruits, vegetables and beverages as long as your arm. But the real eye-opener in these is powdered milk, baby formula. Diploma powdered milk has a parts per million of naturally occurring formaldehyde of 194. That's 2,426 times the World Health Organization's recommended concentration of formaldehyde.
And what's an MDF board? What's an average MDF board giving off? Do we know?
If it meets or exceeds the CARB phase 2, it's 0.05 parts per million.
So let me just...
Which leaches into the air as opposed to foods which we are ingesting. I can't remember. What's the average digestive period? 24 hours, 48?
Yeah, either way, it's in your body for a while. So...
It's in your body for at least 24 hours anyway. We're not scientists, needless to say. We'll put links to these reports in the show notes. I would love somebody to prove me wrong here and tell me, no, you're out by a factor of 100. But even if I was, these are still, whopping levels of formaldehyde.
So here's our headline then. Baby milk has 3,880 times more formaldehyde in it than a sheet of MDF. Nearly 4,000 times more formaldehyde in baby milk than a sheet of MDF.
Yeah, there you go.
And the other thing is, does anyone know of any case of anyone ever dying or getting any form of disease or cancer other than respiratory, which is probably from dust, which is a separate thing? But cancer's the thing that gets mentioned here.
Yeah.
Is there any proven case of this happening ever? I know there is for the formaldehyde side, and I think that was something to do with rats and something to do with people embalming bodies.
Yeah.
And even then it was like dubious, the results on the embalming side, because it could have been other factors as far as I've read. But don't hold me to that. Do your own research.
As always.
If you are literally going to bathe in formaldehyde, then that's probably a bad idea.
Oh, don't breathe in, whatever you do, yeah.
But if you are subject to like the minuscule levels that are so close to natural occurring levels, and 4,000 times less than what you're getting, than what you're feeding to your baby, then is this a thing to worry about?
Yeah, well, that's the crux of everything, really. Are we just going to end up where we're scared of our own shadows here? Or can we actually take this on the chin and say, well, it's really not a thing to fret about? Dust, absolutely. All wood dust is hazardous. We should always take appropriate precautions while we're cutting and machining and sanding.
Yeah, all building dust. I mean, cement dust.
Just for fun, I had my little air quality monitor out. I've just repaired my old one. I had one that went doolally with paint dust. I replaced the sensor on it, and I was just playing with that. And just for fun, I had this new air quality monitor out in the street to see what the base levels were. They exceeded the World Health Organization's levels, surprisingly. But the building where I have my workshop is a no-smoking building, so there's frequently people stood outside having a ciggy. And there was a guy who just arrived, and he seems to arrive at work bright and early, stops and has a ciggy before he goes in. So I just sort of stood behind him, and the particle level in my air quality monitor, measuring PM 2.5 levels, so relatively large particles, went from around about 30 to almost 400 immediately. And we're fretting about what might be leaching out of MDF. I don't want to make light of anything. I certainly don't want to make light of the couples in this article's plight, because it sounds like they've had a torrid time, 18 months or more. Oh, the timeline of the story as well, that's the other thing. 18 months to find a resolution. Starting from April 2017, even allowing a month at either end, this whole sorry story would have been resolved in sort of August or September last year. How come it's only just coming out in the paper now? It's curious. It's very odd.
As I say, I find this sort of thing very frustrating, and in the past, newspapers could get away with printing stuff like this nigh on scot-free and without having any implications or no easy backlash of it. And personally, I will not settle until we've got more information about this, and I'm sure you're similar yourself. Yep. And we will continue to drill into this as much as we can. Yeah,
we'll do what we can, because it affects an entire industry. It badmouths an entire industry, and it's not right.
It makes life very, very difficult if you're a small joinery business going out there trying to do work and earn a living, when you know what is the best product to use for a job, and you know that alternative products aren't going to do as good a job, but yet you've got clients turning around to you trying to tell you what materials to use because they've read some article in a paper that just isn't backed up by...
It isn't backed up by facts. The galling thing is, little guys like us, one-man bands, small firms, makers, installers, going out of their way to make sure that we comply to the same standards as the big boys by using what are probably the most expensive materials, by using ultra-low water-based VOC paints, which I have done since they've been available, 10, 12 years, by using the best quality MDF boards, which are not cheap. I could get MDF for half the price. But we're all going out of our way to meet or exceed these standards, and yet we're getting tarred with the same brush. Of what exactly?
I would love to know anyone listening to the show who has had backlash.
Yeah.
Not just as a result of this specific article, but as a result of similar articles in the past. And as I say, I thought this had all gone away on the basis of science.
I said yesterday, I said earlier that yesterday I popped out to do a quote for somebody. And we were talking about, finishes. Will it be made of MDF? I said, why, yes. But I only use moisture-resistant MDF, which complies to the CARB 2 and exceeds the CARB Phase 2 standards. And I only use ultra-low VOC paints.
So you're getting it already. And I see this regularly from people who have read articles like this, and we are the ones getting the backlash, and it's completely unacceptable. Absolutely. The Guardian should be submitting a retraction and an apology to the joinery industry.
Yeah. It's a very carefully written article, I think. I mentioned earlier I had a theory about why everybody's keeping stum. And this is just me speculating. I wonder if... shameful that the company allowed this to go on for 18 months. In the face of apparently facts that their furniture was creating this problem. I'd have nipped this. Me as an individual would have tried to nip this in the bud way sooner than that. But with 16 grand at stake, you understand why they might be reluctant just to give that up. I wonder if the couple have got hold of the Guardian to represent them to reach a resolution, an agreement. The agreement has been the contractors, the company, have been conspicuous in their silence. They've said nothing. I've contacted them. I've contacted everybody, but I know other people have contacted them directly, looking for them to put their side of the story on, and they're just not responding to anything. So my idea was that there's probably a gag order on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, the part of the agreement was that they don't discuss it.
It's a bit of a rubbish agreement, though. They've had to give a full refund, take all this stuff out, pay for their test, and have a gag order. There's not much in it for the installers, if that's the case. Again, conspicuous in its absence from the report, because they do say, yes, the furniture was removed, yes, the 16,000 deposit was refunded, and yes, the company paid for the $3,000 that the couple had fronted to have this report done. But there's no mention of any, what the Americans would call pain and suffering damages. There's no mention of consequential damages being paid. I wonder if the deal was, well, all right, we'll take this, you pay for the report, we'll put a line under it, but you say nothing about this to anybody, effectively a gag order. And I wondered if that went both ways. I wondered if they'd said, well, okay, but you've got to do the same thing, because the one half of the couple who was the former BBC reporter has been on Twitter putting a couple of little bits about this, but only in reference to the Guardian article. She hasn't put her side across at all. So I wonder if part of the whole agreement, the whole resolution that we assume has been reached by the Guardian, has been that, well, okay, everybody shuts up about this, but the Guardian gets to put the article out. Possibly, very possibly.
Again, this is just speculation. We will probably never know.
We shall continue to drill into this, and we won't let it drop. We will keep drilling into it until we find out as much as we can possibly find out, because articles like this are incredibly damaging, and either every piece of furniture that every joinery company in the UK, if not the world, is going to kill us, or the article is nonsense. And if there are dangers to the level that are being insinuated in the article, then the health and safety executive we rely on the information that we're getting told by the HSE and by building regs and all that sort of thing. All we can do is try and use the materials that we are being told to use, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, we are doing our best to comply or exceed the recommended limits on toxic fumes and the rest of it.
And same with manufacturers who are doing their best to meet and exceed all of these figures that have been put out there by huge scientific bodies who have carried out the testing and they know the facts behind, the risks of formaldehyde and all that sort of thing.
Oh, make no mistake, formaldehyde in high concentration is nasty stuff.
Yeah, so salt.
The thing is, once you've smelled it, and I have, you may not know, my dad was a chemist. He was a chemist for ICI, and when he left, he and my mum set up a small chemical manufacturing firm, and one of the early jobs that they had, one of the early contracts, was to repackage formaldehyde. And he used to get 1,000-litre drums of this stuff, which he'd decant into a 1-litre bottle. And I haven't actually done it, but I have been around when it was being done. And it's like rats. If you smell a rat, you know that smell instantly. Mm-hmm. If you smell formaldehyde, you know it. You know exactly what it is. I know the smell of MDF, and it's not formaldehyde.
Yeah.
I can walk into any workshop anywhere. I know when MDF is being cut.
So your dad must have been exposed to a fair bit of formaldehyde over the years. And how old is he?
93.
Okay. Let's leave it at that. For now, we shall revisit this topic. Hi to Peter's dad. I shall keep my kids away from cucumbers and oranges.
Yeah, and coffee. Don't let them drink coffee.
And coffee, I'm just going to have to live with it.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping coffee.
Yeah.
It's the only vice I've got left.
Well, true. Yeah, talking of that, yeah, we were going to. Where are we? We've probably talked enough on this show, haven't we?
Oh, we're nearly 2 hours in. We haven't even done the Patreon thing yet. We'll have to talk about booze next time.
We will. Okay, we're going to talk about drinking or non-drinking. That'll be exciting. Hi, my name's Peter. No, never mind. First show of season 3. Should we start?
Yeah, we're 1 hour 45 in.
Thanks so much for your support. We've got 125 patrons.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
Remember, once we get up to that 200 mark, we will attempt to do weekly shows.
We'll be attempt to do weekly shows. Yeah, so if you're enjoying the podcast, then throw $1 in the pot. We'd appreciate that.
Help us keep the lights on the show.
Absolutely. We have 176 5-star reviews on iTunes. Pretty fantastic. Thank you very much for all of those. If you can spare the time, then go and rate and review us on iTunes. That really helps push us up the stack in iTunes, because obviously further up the stack is where we want to be in the rankings and ratings. You can contact us, of course, either through email, contact@measuringuppodcast.com, or through Twitter @measuringuppc, or on Instagram @measuringuppodcast. Andy Mac, what's your places for contact?
You can find me on YouTube, Gosforth Handyman on YouTube, and Gosforth Andy on Twitter, and Gosforth Handyman on Instagram. And what about for you?
On the Twitters, I am at 10 Minute Shop. I am 10 Minute Workshop on Instagram, and 10 Minute Workshop on YouTube. 10minuteworkshop.tv will take you straight to my YouTube channel. Couple of little shout outs, maybe.
Go for it.
Okay, just a couple of quick things. Couple of small YouTube channels that I've come across that I've been meaning to talk about for a little while. Just want to give a quick shout out to Bob at White Dog Garage. Bob's, I think, is a retired Aussie who does a sort of mix of woodworking and metalworking. Great channel. These are small channels, less than 100 subscribers, so go and check them out. Check out their content. Bob's doing great work there. And another one was Goran, I think it's Eliasson. He's at A Nomad's Projects on YouTube. Goran's doing woodworking and does great stuff. Again, small channel. I think he's got about 20 videos out there and had around 40 subscribers last time I looked. So go and check those out. If you have high blood pressure and a thing about table saw safety, you might want to give Goran's channel a miss. He has a slightly cavalier and interesting attitude towards table saws. Well worth a look for what he's doing, but perhaps not for the health and safety aspect. We want to thank some of our Patreon supporters, don't we?
Yeah, go for it. You got the list?
I will thank my list first. Here we go. Thank you very much to Douglas Deal, Thistledew, Brendan from the Shades Workshop, Tin Bowers or Bowers, Nick Fajardo, Adrian Millington, Chris Davidson, Paul Gardner, Eddie Carroll, James Hewitt, Cole Pountney from the Strawbite Workshop, Steve Avery, Peter Towan, Owen Bullock, Tony Carnell, Adam Padley, Chris Mark Duthie, Max Weitz, Mark Duff, and Ben Harker.
And I would like to thank Harry Capper, John T. Lynch, Duncan, Chris Stokesmore, Ben Campbell at the Colonel Collective, Jason Williams, Wilson Chan, Kevin Steer, Dominique Kojinson, Andy Farmer, Randall Davis, David Chisnell, Kevin Miller, Piece of Timber, Andrew Marnell, James's Man Cave, Graham Bailey, Mike Broom, Rakesh Patel, Paul Cunningham, and James Ian Wilson. Thank you all so much for the support that you're giving us via Patreon and helping us keep this show on the road. And thank you everyone for listening to the show. And I hope that you have enjoyed our first episode of Season 3. A bit of a contentious one, but you can join us now over on Patreon, and we'll do a quick after show on Patreon.
We'll do a quick after show just for our Patreon supporters. As I say, you can support us through Patreon. at Measuring Up Podcast on Patreon. Thank you very much to everybody who does that, and we will see you over in the after show.
See you next time.
Take care.